Hi, I'm George. Welcome to my YouTube channel and welcome to the Algarve in Portugal. Today I'm in Praia, Cova, Redonda. Really beautiful beach. It's a bit less sunny than it was yesterday, so a few clouds in the sky, but the temperature is still nice and warm. And I'm going to be painting on a landscape format. I'm going to try and paint this cliff face here. I really like the golden colors of the rocks. I also like the shadow it's causing in the sea, a really nice green shadow. And maybe the sun will come out a bit more as I paint. Remember, please hit that subscribe button and let's start painting. I've set up right on the sand with a clear view of the cliffs and the water as it gently rolls against the shore. And it's a scene full of light and colour. And the clouds have lifted a bit now that I've set up, and a bit more of that blue sky is now breaking through. So before starting, I've toned my canvas with a wash of raw umber, creating a warm brownish yellow ground, and this removes the stark white of the canvas and gives me a middle tone to work on, and this is perfect for judging the true value of the colour mixes that I put down. As I toned my canvas recently before I started painting, I can wipe back some of this ground and bring back some of that white for the lightest sections of my painting, such as the sky in this case. I've placed the horizon line a bit higher than halfway down the painting, and this leaves plenty of room for the cliffs and the sweep of the sand in the foreground, which will both be important parts of my composition. I start with the sky. This sets the mood for the painting, and I find it helps me key the rest of the painting's values as I can compare them in relation to the sky. Near the horizon, the colour is slightly lighter and warmer, and I use a colour mix of titanium white, cobalt blue, yellow ochre, and a small touch of alizarin crimson. And I paint a soft transition of the sky above the horizon, which is warmer and lighter, as it gradually goes higher up the painting and takes on a deeper blue hue. And then I paint some of these clouds sitting on top of this soft gradation of the sky. And they're actually the lightest part of the sky, and to paint these I use mostly titanium white with a small touch of cadmium yellow just to give them a warm glow. And as I paint these clouds, I keep their edges soft by blending them into the surrounding sky so that they feel distant and atmospheric. Next I move down to the sea. On the horizon it's a deep, rich blue, a mix of ultramarine blue and some titanium white. And as the sea gets closer to the shore, it becomes lighter in value, so I add a bit more titanium white to my colour mix, and I'm leaving the section where the waves are crashing onto the sand for now, and I will get into this in more detail later on. And where the sea is picking up the reflection of the cliff above, I use a slightly darker and greener colour mix. And now I'm painting this cliff, and for the shadow section I use a colour mix of cobalt blue, yellow ochre, alizarin crimson, raw umber, and a little bit of titanium white, and I start off by thinly applying this mix to my canvas, and it actually mixes a bit with that brown imprimatura, giving a slightly warmer yellowish glow. And as I go, I vary the colour mixes within the shadow section. I add more blue in places that catch reflected light from the sea or the sky, and more yellow for sections which are receiving reflected light either from the sand or bounce light from other rocks within this rock face. For the sunlit sections I use mostly titanium white with a small touch of yellow ochre and cadmium red, creating a warm creamy orange that really captures the late afternoon light. And it's really important to keep the light and the shadow mixes separate on your palette. And as a rule, nothing in the shadow section should be as light as anything in the light section, and likewise nothing in the light section should be as dark as anything in the shadow section. And it's important to keep these mixes separate, as once they start to blend, you lose that clarity of temperature and value, which gives sunlight its believable contrast. So you want cool shadows and warm lights in this outdoor setting. And painting white objects, or close to white objects in this case, in natural sunlight is one of my favourite things to do, as you can really see so many subtle shifts in colour and temperature. And even though the object's local colour may be white, or in this case a sort of light yellow, you get some really beautiful colours within the shadows being caused by bounce light and reflected light, and also some nice warmths in the sunlit areas. I'm now thickly loading my brush with titanium white to paint these waves crashing against the shore. And closer to the water's edge, I use a different colour mix consisting of ultramarine blue and a small touch of alizarin crimson with some titanium white, where the wet sand picks up the reflections of the sky. For the sand, I'm using a colour mix consisting mostly of yellow ochre and titanium white, but also a bit of raw umber, cobalt blue and a small touch of alizarin crimson, as the tendency is to make the sand far too yellow. So by adding a bit of alizarin crimson and cobalt blue, it just neutralises the sand to a slightly warmer grey. In the foreground, I'm painting a bright blue umbrella, and its cool hue contrasts nicely against the warmth of the sand. This works as an anchor for the scale of the scene, and also adds a bit more visual interest and narrative to the painting. Using some titanium white with a small touch of cadmium yellow, I load a small pointed brush and tap in tiny touches across the water to give these sparkling highlights of the sunlight dancing on the surface of the sea. And as I paint, the sparkles on the water have increased more and more as the clouds have lifted, and also the sun has moved a bit more in the sky as well. To paint the footprints in the sand, I've added a bit of ultramarine blue and alizarin crimson to the colour mix, and this darkens it and cools it slightly, and also pushes it slightly closer to purple. I then use some small flicks of a lighter colour mix consisting of titanium white and yellow ochre to paint the sand which is raising up around these dips of shadow. I also add some distant figures to the scene, suggested with simple marks. I paint a few swimmers in the sea and people walking along the sand. And this is enough to give the scene a sense of life without overcrowding it. And here I'm just packing up my wet painting safely using my Alla Prima art carrier, which is my own design, and I designed it specifically to carry wet paintings when you're painting en plein air or travelling. And if you're interested in purchasing your own one, then I've put a link to our website and our Etsy shop in the description. So I hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, please do give me a thumbs up, leave a comment, and do subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. It means a lot to me. Thank you and goodbye.